Piton ug iyang asawang bulanon
magtiayon sa lalawigan sa Bohol.
Ng isang dayuhan at ang kanyang asawang Pilipina.
Pitong Congresswoman Alexi Totor ang programang pabahay ng mga asawang Martin sa probinsya ng Bohol dahil sa inisyatibong tumulong sa mga Boholano.
Don't forget to share.
Hey, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines, and here I am with my louder voice. Do any of you remember when Beth used to say louder your voice because I spoke too quietly, and now some of our subscribers are bringing that up again, so I'm trying to speak louder, which is just not my style really. So why am I here? Well, I'm here because it's what we do, of course, and what I really wanted to address, let me adjust that. What I really wanted to address was all of the great comments that we've had about the little boy for whom we are building a house right now. And for those of you who may not have seen any of the videos, this is a child with a pretty tough life so far, and yet there's something about Filipino spirit that is I don't know, it just can't be defeated. It always amazes me. If you look at the video that will be coming up, Beth is still out of the house. I came home early because there were things that I wanted to do. We're trying to readjust our life so that we get more time at home, so that we can do a different kind of video, so that we can regulate the amount of time that we're out of the house building and still doing things at home. Like, things are just piling up at home that we really need to do, but that's not, I've gone off the subject again. I really wanted to thank everybody for taking such an interest in this little guy. He spends his day going from house to house. There are two houses, obviously the one that he lives in, if you can call it that, and then he goes to a relative's house, the video of which I made today, but which hasn't been uploaded yet. But if you look at that video, you'll see what I mean about how Filipinos can find something to laugh and smile about when they are living in the most wretched conditions. And the house that our little boy, our little hero, drags himself to, because that's the way that he gets around, he pulls himself by his hands and he pulls his body after it, and I still believe that there's some strength in those legs. One of the things that someone said which got my interest was, they said foot drop. They called the condition that I've been trying to explain as foot drop, and that is that if you think that this is the foot, I'm holding a leg upside down now, okay, because it's hard to take it that way. So this is a foot, and this is here. So here you've got the ankle and the leg. Right, now if this is being dragged, then what happens is that the foot actually starts to take on an almost straight line condition. And that, apparently, that I've learned from one of our subscribers, is foot drop, and it's a familiar condition. Well, it's something which obviously has to follow if someone is dragging themselves along because they have no feeling from, let's say, the knee down. I'm comfortable saying from the knee down. Now, they said, the same person that taught me this little expression said maybe a pair of ankle boots might be an easy way of rectifying that. I'm sure that it would help. Let me address that person and you'll know who you are. I haven't got my phone with me and I'm terrible at finding the appropriate comment just on cue. So I'm not even going to try. But that person who recommended that, the only thing with those recommendations is that this is a child who has never worn shoes. And not even slippers, what Filipinos call slippers, which Aussies would call thongs, I would call it a flip-flop, and any number of things, but it's that simple piece of rubber with something that goes between the toes, the big toe and the next one down, and that's what holds it on, and that's what everybody wears in the Philippines. So how would we get him to put that boot on? Not put it on, he'll put it on for a couple of times, and then because it's not it's not comfortable, there'll be a certain amount of discomfort. So I see it as something where we would get it and it would be put on for a few times and then it would be abandoned. He has a wheelchair. Now, probably he could have had a certain amount of mobility with that wheelchair, but the wheelchair is folded and leaning, and has obviously been leaning for some time against the house because it looks like it's rusting. And that's one of those stainless steel jobs as well. It was an expensive chair when it was bought. That same chair, before we knew that this child had that chair, and we were thinking that that was going to be part of the solution, when we were told about the case through our friends at PNP, the police at Taliban. So when we were there being investigated, we also then started talking about cases and how our mission, and they already knew about that anyway. So the lady that you saw, who was so gentle and caring with that little boy in one of the previous videos, a police officer, and married, by the way, because somebody said, is she married? Well, I asked her yesterday and she said, yes, I am. And so I told her that you were interested, whoever you are, and she's married. So she was the one that brought up the case, as I remember, and she told us about it. And she told us how bad the house was and all of that. So then the next day they took us along and we met the family and we met the child and we saw the houses and we said, yes, we'll build a house. And yes, we'll try to do something to help the child. That's really what we're there about. Now, the house that he drags himself to and fro from is a relative, so he is related to the 4 children that you will meet on the video. Adorable, adorable kids. One of the smallest, the little girl, I saw her on 6-foot stilts. Can you imagine? I don't know how she ever got up there, I'll never know. But she was walking around on stilts, made of bamboo. So anyway, we met. I went along, Beth said, why don't you go along and do a video of that house, because she wants to build another house there, where we are now committed. We're going to build that. We've already told the children there, how would you like a house? And of course they're very excited about that now, although how real it is to them I don't know. But anyway, we are going to build another house there when we've finished house 70, which is the house for the crippled boy. So back to the video at hand. Lots of you made other suggestions. The suggestion that stuck with me was that you know, because he drags himself along, then why would it not work to make up a board that was like a slightly bigger skateboard, and then it would only have small wheels, but he would be able to still drag himself along, and at least he wouldn't be dragging his legs along in the dirt. So that would be a little bit more mobility, and at the moment we're kind of chipping away at this. You may have seen the video where Beth went out and bought an off-the-shelf plastic, like a little buggy, with a steering wheel, and it's meant to be pushed by another kid. So that's worked out very well. Now, as somebody rightly said, that's not going to work. Well, if the object was to give that little boy some fun, it's been a 100% success, okay? So will it have him walking? No, of course it won't, because he has to sit in the ordinary seated position with his legs out front on either side of the steering wheel. So he needs another kid to push him. Guess what? Plenty of kids there to do just that. So that's a success, and the 3 times that I've been since we bought that for him, he's been on that thing. And so I think that that's been instrumental in putting a smile on that little boy's face. So that, as we say, is not a permanent solution. It's not the final resolution, but it's a little along the way. Now, what were some of the other? Obviously, he needs an orthopedic foot surgeon. He needs someone who, I'm looking at it just purely as someone who, without any training at all, even in engineering, I have an engineering aptitude, if you want to put it that way, because I'm a carpenter and I can visualize something in box shapes which will result in having a piece of furniture made, and I design furniture, so I have an engineering aptitude, shall we put it that way. So with that in mind, I think that if we take him to a surgeon, the first thing that's going to be done, in fact we probably will save some time if we go to our regular general practitioner, take the child along there and ask for a note to take it to the hospital and get him x-rayed. So we would have him x-rayed probably from the hips down, and let's see what shape the bones are in, and then when we have our appointment with an orthopedic, with a bone, they call them bone doctors here. When we go to see the bone doctor, we'll be armed with the information that will give him an insight into what's happening. I've got to have a drink of coffee. I made that coffee just before I started the video. So, are there any other suggestions that I haven't? Well, physio. Some of you recommended physio. Now that's a little bit more difficult, although I'm thinking that we could have a homegrown grassroots physiotherapist, of which there are many. In the Philippines, they self-prescribe, very often because they simply do not have the money at the level that we're talking about. They don't have the money to be able to just, hey, this is a job for hospital. No, there is a fear of going to the hospital because they won't have the money. Now, you may have seen another video where the father and mother of a young girl who, let me see, how old would she have been? I think about 14. difficult to tell because some of these kids are so tiny that you're looking and thinking, oh my God, they're very young. But she must have been about 14. Anyway, on one of her breasts, she's now actually, I think they had a scan, and she has a lump, and it's got to come out. So there's a cyst there, and it's better to get it out now. Now, they came to us before going to a hospital. So this is where Beth has just one of Beth's many talents in dealing with people who are in need. She's very skilled at negotiating the hospital and doctors, because that's what she did for 7 or 8 years at the hospital that she worked. So when she left school, I think at something like age 15, she went to Cebu, and she managed to get herself accepted as a working student at, I think it was, the Sacred Hearts Hospital. Now the trolls know that whether it's a Sacred Hearts Hospital, because that's one of their little snidey tricks. They've actually been on the phone asking about Beth. Well, what kind of worker was Beth? They're not trying to find out what kind of worker she was. They're trying to find out somebody who will say, oh, she was terrible. They were unlucky. So it's not poetry and it's not elegant, but to those who are making that phone call. Anyway, back to being nice again, okay? So we've covered it pretty well. Somebody said an electric wheelchair. That's going to be a lot of money, and probably outside of our reach, and I think probably not a good thing. I think that we need something that keeps that boy, or puts that boy, on his feet. That's why I like the idea, the initial idea. I liked the idea of the wheelchair if he could actually push it. And what they found was, when they got that wheelchair, put it up together and put him in it, he was simply not strong enough to do that. So he couldn't get himself mobile. So that's when it was folded and put to one side and probably never looked at again. Now, do they have smaller wheelchairs? I'm sure out there in your Western world, where you can go down to any hospital and have all kinds of equipment at your disposal, where you have Lowe's, Home Depot, and all kinds of electronic specialist stores, where you can get everything. As an Aussie friend of mine once said, you can get everything that opens and shuts. So yeah, I'm sure that there are, but I've never ever seen anybody in one. Okay, I've seen the ordinary wheelchair, and we've already bought an ordinary wheelchair from Lazada, and we're waiting for delivery for that, for another child who, as it happens, coincidentally, is also unable to walk. We haven't been to see him yet, and so we know that we were asked to get a wheelchair. We were asked to get a wheelchair, and we've ordered one, and in good faith we're hoping that we haven't ordered a wheelchair which will go and have the same fate as our little boy that we've been talking about. In other words, folded against the wall and left. I'm hoping that this little boy will learn to actually use it. If not, well, we're looking at doing something for him again. I'm actually going to I've been along to the hardware store to see what kind of wheels are available. Now, in the case of this, the makeup for this little board that I would make for our little boy, He's 8 years old, not a big child. So a skateboard which is to be the same length as an ordinary skateboard, but probably double the width, because he's going to be sitting on that, and both of his knees are going to have to be accommodated on that board. But, and here's the challenge, and this is why I'll cut a board which is slightly bigger than needed. I'll take it down there, we'll sit the child on the board, and we'll get him to demonstrate where his hands would go. And then I will cut the board and build the board accordingly. I've been down and looked at the wheels that are available. They're either far too big, or they're the right size, but they're only thin. They're only this kind of, so we're looking at something that's as thick as my thumb. And the concern obviously is, will it not just dig into the soil? But we looked today, and that little buggy that we bought for him, which is now being pushed around everywhere, it can be steered. So the steering, the very act of steering, will mean it will dig into the soil. But the buggy that I make will not do that. It will have multi-directional wheels, which I was hoping if I could get 2 fixed wheels for the front, and then have the multi-directional wheels, swivel wheels, at the back. But here again, the very kind staff at the Alturas hardware section, I asked the young man, this is what I'm looking for, fixed wheels for the front, and I explained to him what we want, and he came up with the next obvious thing: always keep on listening. I learn a lot by listening. And he said, well, what you could do is just have a tack weld put in to keep it straight. Problem solved. So that's what I'll be doing. The little buggy that we made has served a dual purpose. It showed us that it will be usable if we make up an expanded board. Okay, so that's going to be my next little project, which I'll be doing in time for handing over the house. We'd like to also thank here the PNP, who sent along a workforce of guys and gals who came along, and they didn't come along to have their photograph taken, they came along to work, and they did that, and they worked hard. Officers of the PNP, thank you very much. We are so grateful for that, and the work has made a great deal of difference in the speed that we will be able to provide this house. So I think that's saying thanks to everybody except the people that made this possible, and my sincere thanks for those heartfelt thanks. That it's not easy to convey the emotions that we feel when we go to see one of these houses. The house that I went to with the 4 children that the little boy is related to. He goes there to watch television, and I went into that home today. It's a dirt floor, not a great roof, so when it really rains hard, that floor becomes muddy. It had a bench, and the bench was situated in a place where, if this was the bench up behind the camera now, behind you as a viewer, the television was set up on a shelf, and it was obvious that they would sit around and watch the Great God television. Not my favorite piece of equipment, okay, but it provides for people who have very, very little. So the emotions that you feel when you see how painfully simply people are living, and yet can smile and laugh and be respectful. All of those children, you'll see the video how just by telling them that they were beautiful. I told the young man who looked about 10 or 12 and was very handsome, and I told him, wow, you're guapo, which means you're handsome. And the older of the little girls is beautiful, and it's so easy to say, wow, Miss Universe, and then everybody laughs, and they're so easy to laugh and have fun that you have to admire the spirit, because these are kids that don't have very much. You know, one of the toys, the only toy that I saw anybody use was a pair of stilts, and they're made of bamboo, and it looked like a father had put those together, and the kids were stomping around on those things and looking really good. So, for those who have made it possible, who have supported us, and we are humbled by how you have trusted and empowered us to give the help that we give. And we're now looking at House 71 as being actually on, well, it's on the radar. It's the next, we're looking at it, we're hoping, we're planning, we're doing what we usually do to make it happen. Thanks to everybody for looking in and for your interest. It's much appreciated. And bye for now.